I was not expecting my new apartment to come with a ghost or worse, a very talkative ghost. The first time I heard the whisper, I actually dropped my cereal bowl and thought maybe I was losing my mind. It was past midnight in Brooklyn, boxes still stacked high, the smell of new paint clinging to everything. I had been pacing the floor, restless, because moving to the city was supposed to be a fresh start after everything back home crumbled. I thought loneliness would be my only companion. But then a low, hesitant voice brushed against my ear, muffled, like it was coming through the walls. "Hey, can you hear me?" I froze. My skin prickled, and my breath caught in my throat. The sound didn't come from my phone, not from the hallway. It was inside the wall. For a long second, I thought about bolting out the door, but something about the tone, the shaky, fragile way he spoke kept me rooted. My fingers brushed against the plaster, and before I even knew what I was doing, I whispered back, "Yes, who are you?" There was silence. Then, the faintest laugh, tinged with disbelief. "You can actually hear me." That was the beginning. At first, I convinced myself it was a quirk of the building. Old pipes, maybe, but night after night, the voice came back. Sometimes low, sometimes playful, sometimes aching like it carried the weight of the whole world. I never saw him. I didn't even know if he was real. Yet, every time we talked, it felt like peeling away a piece of my own loneliness. He told me his name was Adrian. 24. Lived or maybe was trapped just beyond my wall. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't figure out if there was actually another apartment on the other side. "You sound like someone who doesn't trust easily," he said one night, his voice barely above a breath. "I don't," I admitted, lying in bed with the lights off, my hand pressed flat to the cool plaster as if it were his skin. "People leave. Not everyone leaves," he whispered. "Sometimes, we stay even when we shouldn't." Something inside me ached at those words, like he was carrying a story too heavy to speak. And before I knew it, I found myself telling him things I hadn't told anyone. About my father who hadn't spoken to me since I came out. About the boyfriend who broke me in ways I still couldn't admit to my friends. About how moving here was supposed to be a clean slate, but all I felt was hollow. And every time Adrian listened, really listened, his silence was never empty, it was alive, filled with understanding. But there was one problem. The more I spoke to him, the more I craved to see him. I pressed my cheek against the wall one night and whispered, "Do you ever want to meet me? Like, actually?" The silence stretched long enough for me to think he'd disappeared. My chest tightened. Then came his reply, so faint it nearly broke me. "I can't. Not yet." The weeks slipped by, and the world outside my apartment felt dull compared to the hours spent in conversation with Adrian. He became the thread that held me together. His laugh, sometimes quiet, sometimes unrestrained, echoed through the walls and filled spaces inside me I didn't know were empty. I learned his quirks. He hated coffee but loved the smell of it. He liked old jazz records and sometimes hummed them for me, his voice melting the room into warmth. He had nightmares, though he never explained what they were about. On those nights, his whisper trembled like a child's, and all I could do was press my palm harder to the wall and whisper back, "I'm here. You're not alone." It was absurd falling for a voice, and yet, it felt more real than any love I had before. But every love story carries a shadow. The first crack appeared when I tried to look him up. Adrian was all I had, no last name, no details. But curiosity gnawed at me. I asked the landlord if there was someone in the apartment next to mine. He frowned and said, "That unit's been vacant for over a year." My heart lurched. That night, I confronted Adrian. My voice shook as I pressed against the wall. "Why did you lie to me?" His reply was sharp, panicked. "I didn't. Please, you don't understand. I'm not lying. I'm here." "Where is here, Adrian?" His silence felt like knives. Then he whispered, "If I tell you, you'll leave. And I can't, please, I can't lose you." Something about the desperation in his voice broke me. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but instead, I whispered, "I'm not going anywhere." But inside, doubt grew like a poison. Days bled into nights, and the city outside continued to move, uncaring. My coworkers at the bookstore thought I was just shy, maybe antisocial. They had no idea I was racing home each night to press my ear to the wall, waiting for a man who might not even exist. One evening, the whispers didn't come. I waited until dawn, heart pounding, pacing the room like a caged animal. Panic clawed at me. What if he was gone? What if he had left me like everyone else? Finally, just as the first light bled into the window, I heard it. Weak, fragile. Ethan? Yes, I breathed, my whole body trembling with relief. I'm here. But this time, his voice was different. He was crying. I don't know how much longer I can stay, he whispered. I pressed my forehead against the wall, tears burning my eyes. Then let me see you, please. I don't care who you are, or what this is. My voice cracked. I just need to know you're real. Silence. Then, so soft I almost didn't hear. Tomorrow night, midnight, at the fire escape. My heart thundered. Finally, the wall would not be enough. That night, I barely slept. My mind churned with 100 questions, 1,000 fears. What if he didn't show? What if he wasn't who I thought? What if this whole thing shattered in an instant? But when the clock struck midnight, I stood at the fire escape, breath fogging in the cold night air. And there he was, a boy with dark, tousled hair, eyes rimmed with sleepless nights, leaning against the railing like he'd been holding his breath for years. He looked just as broken and just as Olivia as I felt. For a long moment, we didn't speak. We just stared, as if both of us were afraid that one word might shatter the fragile miracle of finally standing in the same world. Then he whispered, the same way he had through the wall, "You can really see me." And I took one step closer, my chest aching with something I couldn't contain. "Yes," I said, my voice breaking, "and I'm never letting you disappear again." Adrian flinched at my words, like he wasn't used to someone promising permanence. For a moment, his eyes darted away, scanning the shadows of the alley below as though afraid someone was watching. But then his gaze returned to me, wide and fragile, filled with a longing I recognized too well. I wanted to reach out, to touch his hand, to prove this wasn't just some dream carved out of loneliness. My fingers hovered in the cold air between us. He glanced down at them, then at me as if debating whether he had the right. Slowly, hesitantly lifted his hand, and our fingertips brushed. The contact was electric, not in the magical sense, but in the deeply human way of touching another soul after months of starvation. It was soft, trembling, real. I wanted to memorize the warmth of his skin, the lines of his fingers, the way his breath caught like he was terrified of needing me too much. "Adrian," I whispered, my throat tight. "You're real." He gave me the smallest smile, broken but beautiful. "I told you." We stood there for what felt like forever. The city humming around us, distant traffic and the occasional shout echoing in the night. But none of it mattered. The wall that had separated us was finally behind us, and yet, I could still feel it like a ghost lingering in the air between our bodies. "Why the wall?" I finally asked. "Why only whispers? What's stopping you?" His face darkened, the faint smile fading. He pulled his hand back, leaning against the railing, and I saw the weight he carried settle back onto his shoulders. "I can't explain everything," he said quietly. "Not yet. You wouldn't believe me." I swallowed, frustration burning my chest. "Adrian, I believed you when everyone else would have thought I was crazy. I've talked to a wall for weeks because of you. Don't you think I deserve the truth?" He looked at me like I had just stabbed him. Then he shook his head, eyes glassy. "If I tell you, you'll walk away. And I don't think I could survive that." The vulnerability in his voice cracked me open. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, but instead I found myself softening, stepping closer until there was barely a breath between us. "I'm not leaving," I said firmly. "Whatever it is, we face it together." For a second, I thought he might finally tell me. His lips parted, his chest rising and falling like he was gathering courage. But then a window slammed shut somewhere above us, and the sound jolted him. His entire body stiffened. "I have to go," he whispered, retreating back toward the shadows. "No, wait, Adrian." I reached for him, but he was already gone, swallowed by the darkness of the fire escape. And I was left standing there, my heart pounding with both triumph and fear. I had seen him, touched him. He was real. But the mystery wasn't over, it was only beginning. The days that followed were a blur. At work, I shelved books without seeing their titles, answered customers with automatic politeness. My mind was elsewhere, always back in that moment on the fire escape. His eyes, his touch, his fear. Every night I waited by the wall again. Sometimes he came, sometimes he didn't. When he did, his voice was softer, as if the encounter had shaken something loose inside him. "You weren't supposed to see me," he admitted one night. "Why not?" "Because once you see someone, it's harder to let go." The words hit me like a stone. I pressed my hand to the plaster, fighting back the ache. "I don't want to let go." His breath caught audibly, and then he whispered, "Neither do I." But even in those tender exchanges, a shadow hung over us. His pauses grew longer, his sighs heavier, like he was carrying a secret too large for the both of us. One evening, I couldn't hold back anymore. "Adrian, are you in trouble?" Silence. "Adrian, please. You can trust me." Finally, his voice broke through, ragged. "It's not about trust. It's about danger. If you knew what I've done, what's chasing me." He trailed off, and I heard the faint thud of his fist against the wall. "You deserve better than this." My heart lurched. "Don't you dare decide what I deserve. You think I care about perfect? I just want you." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. But then he whispered, almost like a confession, "You'll regret that." I didn't reply, because in my chest, I already knew I wouldn't. It was 2 weeks later when the cracks finally widened. I had just closed up the bookstore and was walking home through the chilly night air when I noticed the black SUV parked at the corner of my block. 2 men inside watching the building. Their gaze was sharp, predatory, and though they didn't look at me directly, something about them set my instincts on fire. When I reached my apartment, I pressed against the wall as soon as I locked the door. "Adrian, are you there?" For a long moment, nothing. Then his voice came, hurried, trembling. "Ethan, listen to me. If you ever see men in a black car near the building, don't talk to them. Don't even look at them." My blood ran cold. "They're outside right now." A sharp intake of breath. Then, "Stay away from the windows. Don't let them see you." My heart pounded. "Adrian, what the hell is going on?" "I can't." His voice broke, filled with raw panic. "If they know you've spoken to me, they'll come after you too. You have to promise me you'll keep your distance." I pressed harder against the wall, my own fear mixing with anger. "Don't you dare push me away now. If you're in danger, I'm not abandoning you." The silence stretched so long I thought he'd disappeared again. Then, finally, his whisper came, shredded and fragile. "I killed someone, Ethan." The words slammed into me like a truck. My knees buckled, and I sat hard on the floor, my back against the wall. "No," my throat was dry, my mind spinning. "No, that's not Adrian. What are you talking about?" His voice was hollow, stripped bare. "It wasn't supposed to happen. I didn't mean to, but they'll never believe me. And now they're hunting me. That's why I hide. That's why I stay behind walls." I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. I wanted to deny it, to erase the words, but the tremor in his voice was too real. And yet, even then, some part of me refused to let go. "Adrian," I whispered, choking on the weight of it all. "Tell me everything. If you trust me at all, tell me the truth." On the other side of the wall, I heard him slide down, his back against the plaster, until we were sitting on opposite sides, our bodies only inches apart. His voice came low, broken, and slowly he began to tell me. It was a story of survival, of a night gone wrong, of a man cornered into choices that left blood on his hands. He told me about the fight, about how fear drove him to lash out, about how the life he took wasn't clean, wasn't innocent, but it haunted him all the same. He spoke of debts and threats, of shadows that never stopped following. And through it all, I listened. I listened until the tears streaked my face, until my chest ached with the sheer weight of his pain. When his voice finally cracked into silence, I whispered the only thing I could. "You're not a monster." He let out a laugh, hollow, bitter. "You don't mean that." "I do," I said firmly, pressing my palm flat against the wall. "Because monsters don't cry in the dark. Monsters don't regret. You're human." And my voice broke. "I don't care what you've done. I care about who you are." On the other side, his breath trembled. And then, softly, I felt the faintest thud against the wall, like his palm meeting mine. For the first time, I realized we weren't just whispering through barriers. We were breaking them. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay on the floor, my hand against the plaster, feeling the faint warmth of his presence. And even though fear coiled around me, even though danger pressed at the edges of our fragile world, I knew one thing with terrifying certainty. I was in love with him. The morning after Adrian's confession, I couldn't look at the world the same way. The sunlight streaming through my blinds seemed too bright, too indifferent, as if it mocked the storm inside me. People outside hurried along the sidewalks, coffee cups in hand, talking about deadlines and subway delays. None of them knew that, in a small Brooklyn apartment, a man hid behind walls, hunted for something he claimed he never meant to do. And a stupid, reckless May couldn't stop loving him. At work, I shelved books and smiled at customers, but every sound, every flicker of movement near the door made me jump. My mind was filled with questions. Were the men in the black SUV still watching? Would they come back? And most of all, how much time did I really have with Adrian before everything fell apart? That night, I pressed my palm to the wall, desperate. "Adrian, are you there?" His voice came, rough, like he hadn't slept. "Always." I closed my eyes, relief flooding me. I thought maybe you'd be gone." There was a pause. Then, softly, "Sometimes I think I should be." My chest tightened. Don't say that. "You don't get it," he whispered, his words cracking. "I've ruined lives, Ethan. If I stay near you, I'll ruin yours too. Then let me decide if that's worth it." I snapped, my voice sharper than I meant. Silence followed, heavy and loaded, until I forced myself to soften. "I'm already in this, Adrian. I don't want out." On the other side of the wall, I heard him inhale shakily. Then, almost as if confessing to himself more than me, he said, "God, why did it have to be you?" The more I knew, the deeper I fell. He told me fragments, always in whispers, always with hesitation, as though every truth he gave me might push me away. He had once worked for someone dangerous, someone who demanded loyalty at any cost. He tried to leave, but leaving wasn't allowed. The night of the killing, it was supposed to be self-defense, but that didn't matter. To the world, he was guilty. To the people chasing him, he was a liability that had to be erased. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt protective, furious even, that he had been cornered into silence and shadows. "You deserve more than this," I told him one night, my hand flat against the wall. "You deserve freedom, a chance to breathe without hiding." He gave a soft, disbelieving laugh. "And what would I do with freedom? People like me don't get new beginnings." "Yes, you do," I whispered fiercely. "We both do." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, gently, he said, "You sound like someone who believes in happy endings." I swallowed hard. "I sound like someone who believes in you." It wasn't long before the SUV came back. I saw it from my window one cold evening, parked across the street again. Same men, same hard expressions. My blood ran cold, and before I could stop myself, I pressed against the wall. "Adrien Thierry here again." A sharp curse escaped him. "Ethan, listen to me. If they're outside, you cannot draw attention. No lights near the window. No sudden movements. Pretend you don't notice." My pulse thundered. "How long have they been after you?" "Too long," he muttered. Then, after a beat, "I'll have to leave soon. The words gutted me. No, you can't. I can't drag you down with me, Ethan. If they realize you've been helping me, they won't hesitate. I'm not helping you, I whispered, desperate. I'm with you. A long silence stretched between us. Then, with a voice that sounded like it was breaking, Adrian said, "Don't make this harder than it already is." But it was already too late. My heart was in his hands, and nothing, not walls, not fear, not even danger could change that. The night it all came to a head, the whispers weren't enough anymore. I couldn't stand being separated by plaster, by secrecy. I climbed back onto the fire escape, the same place where I had first seen his face. The city air was sharp, biting at my skin, but I didn't care. "Adrian," I called softly, my voice trembling. "Please, come out." For a moment, nothing. Then slowly a shadow moved. And there he was, stepping into the dim glow of the streetlight, his features worn with exhaustion, his eyes haunted but alive. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice urgent but shaky. "And yet I am," I answered, "because I can't keep pretending the wall is enough." He looked at me, torn, his chest rising and falling as though fighting himself. Finally, he stepped closer. Just one step, then another, until we were only a breath apart. "Ethan," his voice cracked, "if you stay near me, you'll burn." I reached out, trembling, and took his hand. For a second, he froze, like no one had touched him in years. Then his fingers curled around mine, tight, desperate. "Then let me burn with you," I whispered. His eyes closed, and for the first time he didn't pull away. We didn't kiss that night. It wasn't about desire, it was about survival. About holding on to the one fragile truth we had. That, for however long we had left, we weren't alone. We sat on the metal steps of the fire escape, hands intertwined, listening to the city breathe around us. He told me more in those hours than he ever had before about the choices that led him here, about the guilt that gnawed at him every time he closed his eyes, about how he hadn't touched another soul in months, because touch meant vulnerability. "Do you regret meeting me?" I asked softly. His eyes met mine, dark and raw. "Every second. And not at all." I smiled through the ache in my chest. "That makes two of us. But happiness is always fleeting when danger lurks." 2 nights later, I woke to the sound of heavy boots in the hallway. My heart jolted. I pressed against the wall, frantic. "Adrian, do you hear that?" His voice came sharp and urgent. "Get away from the door. Now." The boots stopped outside my apartment. A loud knock shattered the silence. "Open up," a man's voice barked. Panic surged through me. I backed away, my breath ragged. Adrian's whisper came like fire through the wall. "Don't answer. Whatever happens, don't open that door." The knock turned into pounding. "We know he's in there." My blood froze. They weren't after me. They were after him. Adrian's voice shook, fierce and broken all at once. "Ethan, if they get in, you can't let them see you with me. You have to save yourself." Tears burned my eyes as I pressed against the wall, as if I could hold onto him through sheer will. "No, we do this together." The pounding grew louder, the door rattling on its hinges. And in that moment, with the world about to crash down on us, I realized something with terrifying clarity. I would rather risk everything than lose him. The pounding on my door rattled the entire frame. My chest heaved with panic, but my body refused to move. It felt like the world had shrunk to the thin wall separating me from Adrian. I could hear his breath through it, ragged, fast like a hunted animal. "Ethan," he whispered sharply, "listen to me. This is it. They found me. You have to stay out of this." "No," I hissed back, my palm flat on the plaster. "I'm not letting them take you." The men outside shouted again, their fists shaking the wood. "Open up now." My vision blurred with tears, but I pressed harder against the wall. "Adrian, if they break down that door, I'm standing with you." For a second, silence. Then I heard it, his voice cracking, trembling. "Why would you throw your life away for me?" "Because it's already yours." I whispered. The doorknob rattled violently. My pulse thundered, my knees weak. And then miraculous lithe sound of retreating footsteps. The SUV's engine roared to life outside, fading into the night. They were gone. I slid down to the floor, shaking, tears spilling hot down my cheeks. On the other side of the wall, Adrian exhaled a shaky laugh that was closer to a sob. They'll be back, he said. Next time, we might not be so lucky. Then we run, I whispered. What? I pressed my head against the wall, speaking with a conviction I didn't even know I had. We run. Together. You don't get to disappear on me, Adrian. Not now. Not ever. There was a long silence. Then, softly, you'd really leave everything behind for me? I closed my eyes. I already did the moment I heard your voice. We planned it like two fugitives, whispering through the walls at night, scrawling notes to slide under my door when words weren't enough. The city became dangerous, every corner potentially holding eyes that watched too closely. But in the stolen hours on the fire escape, with our hands twined together, hope began to bloom. The night we left, rain slicked the streets. Adrian wore a hood pulled low, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. When I saw him waiting under the flickering streetlight, my breath caught. He looked real, too real to lose. You're sure about this? He asked, voice trembling. I stepped closer, cupping his face in my hands despite the rain. I've never been surer. And then I kissed him. It wasn't the desperate kiss of people about to die, nor the timid brush of strangers testing boundaries. It was fierce, raw, a promise carved into skin and rain. His lips trembled against mine. His fingers clutched the back of my jacket like I was the only anchor keeping him from drifting away. For the first time, the wall was gone, not just the plaster, but every invisible barrier we had built between us. When we pulled away, his forehead rested against mine, his breath warm despite the cold. God, Ethan, I don't deserve you. I smiled through my tears. Then spend the rest of your life proving yourself wrong. We fled the city that night, boarding a bus headed anywhere but here. The world blurred past the window highways, neon signs, strangers sleeping with their heads against the glass. Adrian sat beside me, hood still up, his hand clinging to mine like he was afraid I'd vanish. For the first time since I'd moved into that haunted apartment, I felt free. Terrified, yes, but free. On the third day, we found a small town, far from Brooklyn's shadows. A place with a diner that smelled of grease and coffee, a bookstore that felt like a sanctuary. We rented a tiny room above a laundromat, nothing like the apartment we'd left behind. But when Adrian smiled at me from across the bed, tired but alive, I realized home wasn't walls. It was him. He told me everything, little by little. The mistakes, the regrets, the nights he thought about ending it all. And I told him mine. We stitched ourselves together with truth, with vulnerability, with the kind of love that isn't about perfection but survival. Some nights, he still woke trembling from nightmares, his voice hoarse as he whispered my name. And I would hold him until his breathing steadied, until he believed, even for a moment, that he wasn't alone anymore. Other nights, he'd make me laugh until my stomach hurt, teasing me about my clumsy cooking or the way I dog-eared every book I read. And in those moments, the shadows didn't exist. Months passed. The danger didn't vanish entirely. Shadows still lingered at the edges of our new life. But we learned to live anyway, to walk hand in hand down quiet streets, to drink cheap coffee at the diner, to whisper to each other, not through walls, but face to face in the dark, our lips brushing with every promise. One evening, as the sun sank low, painting the town in gold, Adrian and I sat on the roof of the laundromat. His head rested on my shoulder, our hands tangled together. Do you ever regret it? He asked quietly. Leaving everything behind for me? I turned to look at him, at the boy who had once been nothing more than a voice in the dark, and now was everything. Not for a single second, I said. His eyes softened, and he kissed me slow, lingering, filled with the kind of love that didn't need words. For the first time, I realized the story wasn't about the walls that had separated us. It was about the way we tore them down. about how two broken souls found each other in the cracks and decided to build something whole. And maybe our ending wasn't perfect. Maybe the past would always leave scars. But as I held him under the fading sun, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. We weren't whispers anymore. We were real. We were free. And we were in love. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.